Okay. All right, first of all, hello and welcome to everybody. Good to see you. And I just want to announce, I'm sure many of you are aware, that the Jewish Experience just launched the Clean Speech Colorado yesterday. And it's the third volume of it. It's the third year we're doing it. The first year we focused on not speaking Lashon Hara, of not saying negative, true things about other people. And last year we focused on not offending people with speech directly, just in our one-on-one relationships. And that's called Ona'as Devarim, of like oppressive words. And this year the theme is Oseh Shalom, of making peace, of peaceful words create peace, and how to have peaceful conversations with people, especially people with whom we do not feel at peace. It's easy to have a conversation with someone who's on your same wavelength. It's a whole different thing to have a peaceful conversation with somebody who disagrees with your politics, who disagrees with your religious perspectives, who disagrees with, as I said in my email, how you cook your turkey for Rosh Hashanah. You know, there's like so many hundreds of ways that we can find to disagree with other people. And all of those things become grist for the mill of machlokas, grist for the mill of separation and divisiveness. And our goal is to have a month where a lot of people are focusing on this. And I think we have over 60 organizations in Colorado who have committed to this and are participating. And this is exciting that the whole Clean Speech Colorado has extended to other states and other cities. So we have other states and cities who are part of the program. They're doing their own. I forget which cities, Clean Speech Chicago, Clean Speech Dallas, Clean Speech, a bunch of other cities have joined in. So maybe, hopefully, we'll be able to create a tipping point where you have enough people focused on this idea and really working on it individually and personally to really make a difference. Hello, Eileen, and hello, Daisy. Hello, Trudy.
Hi, how's everybody? Hello.
God, we're good. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
All right. We are going to talk about this week's parsha, and this week's parsha is the parsha of Toldot. And Toldot literally means the generations. And the generations that we're talking about are the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And we're going to talk about Isaac. And this came from a beautiful Devar Torah video from Rabbi David Foreman's organization called Aleph Beta. Always takes a look at, in such an interesting way, at things that we don't see, that are right in front of our faces, and how to look at that and what we can learn. So when you think of Isaac, what stories come to mind for you? There's kind of like two main stories that we think about for Isaac. What are those stories that we think about when we think about Isaac in the Torah? There's kind of two stories associated with him that are the big ticket movie stories. Etta.
The Akedah.
The Akedah, right. And what else? Anything else about Yitzchak?
The birthright.
Exactly, the birthright, which is also in this week's parsha. Okay, so we have the birthright, and those seem to be the stories. And in a way, I won't say that Isaac is involved secondarily, but at some level it's almost secondary, because the story of the Akedah is really, even though it's called the binding of Isaac, is really called Abraham's test. It's actually not called the test of Isaac. I'm not sure why exactly, but it's the test of Abraham. And the birthright is really more about Rebecca and Jacob, of Rebecca coming up with the plan and Jacob being the one to carry it out. And so Isaac is involved in each of those, but he's not the central figure. So the question is, who is Isaac? What is he contributing to the story? And is he just kind of, second fiddle to all of these other people going on in these other major events? So what we're going to take a look at is quite a bit of text that is devoted to Isaac digging wells. Now you might say, well, as a pun, that doesn't sound so exciting. And why is this the main thing that we learn about Isaac? So we're going to take a little trip through the text and look at words that come across in the Hebrew, even though they may not come across in the English. And we're going to talk about what happens with Yitzchak. Okay, what happens with Isaac? So if you have the Chumash, the stone Chumash, it's on page 129. If you don't, it is chapter 26. Chapter 26, verse 1. And it starts off, there was a famine in the land, aside from the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. If you remember Abraham, there was also famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt, and he went with Sarah, said, be my sister, all of that event. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, to Gerar. And Hashem appeared to him and said, don't go down to Egypt, like don't do what your father did. Dwell in the land that I shall indicate to you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For you and your offspring will I give all these lands and establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens, and will give to your offspring all these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring, because Abraham obeyed my voice and observed my safeguards, my commandments, my decrees, and my Torahs. Okay, this should echo and sound to you a little bit like the promise that God made to Abraham. I make you great, I'll give you, you're gonna have this land, I'll give you descendants, etc. And that sounds like the promise is being reiterated to Yitzchak. But there's a very interesting word that God uses when he tells Isaac not to go down to Egypt. He says to dwell in the land that I shall indicate to you. And in verse 3, it says, sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. So the word for to sojourn is the beginning of verse 3, and the word is gur. It's related to the word ger. The word ger means a stranger, and a gur is somebody who is a temporary sojourner, okay? As someone who temporarily lives someplace. Now, this should sound a little strange. God is basically saying to Isaac, live kind of in a temporary way in this land, and I'm also going to give you all of this land and increase your offspring in all these lands, and the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring. So we have a little bit of a conflict. Be like somebody telling you, I'm going to give you this house, but for now, you're a renter. You'd be like, but you just told me you're giving me the house. So why can't I have a house? And yet that's really what God is saying to Isaac. You're going to have this, but for now, I want you to sojourn. I want you to have like a temporary nature. And the question is, why? On one hand, you'd say, well, it wasn't really time yet because there were all these other peoples who were living there. So it just wasn't time yet. But we're going to explore and find out that there's something deeper that Isaac is being told. And not only that he's being told, but that we're being told about how to approach wherever it is that we live, whether it's in Denver, Colorado, or wherever it might be, it's in Florida, wherever it is that we are, what does it mean to be a sojourner, to be a ger, to be lagur ba'aretz, to live in this land? And does Isaac do what he is told to do? So that's going to be what we're going to see. Look in verse 6. It says, so Isaac settled in Gerar. Now, that is a different word, and the word is Vayeshev Yitzchak Bigrar. It says, did Yitzchak remain a sojourner? It's like, no, he didn't. He somehow didn't get the memo exactly of what he was supposed to do, and he sets up a permanent home. Ger, okay, thank you. Ger also means a convert, but of course Yitzchak was not a convert, but it means somebody who comes from outside. So it has the idea of a stranger. So we have like a ger tzedek, a righteous Gentile. But in this lagur it has a related meaning in that it means to be a temporary dweller, that you're not totally settled in. You're not like the natives. And Isaac is told to be a temporary sojourner, but he doesn't do that. It says he settled in Gerar, and it uses the word Vayeshev, and it the whole series happens with Rebecca, etc. Skip over that, and we're going to go now to page 131, verse 12. And it says here that Isaac sowed in that land, and in the year he reaped 100-fold, meaning that his crops were 100 times more abundant than anybody else's or what anybody else would expect. And it said, thus had Hashem blessed him. The man became great and kept becoming greater until he was very great. He had acquired flocks, herds, and many enterprises, and the Philistines envied him. So what did Yitzchak do? So God promised him blessing. But what he didn't realize is that blessing was supposed to be conditioned on his having this temporary status. What did Isaac do instead? We picture our patriarchs and matriarchs living in tents because everybody did, except we know that's not true. People built cities, they were buildings. That's what Yitzchak did. He left his tent and he settled in a city. He built himself a house, he built himself an addition, he built himself enterprises, and he became a person of the land. And things were going really well for him, except for one big problem, where it says, and the Philistines envied him. That there was something about the way he was using his wealth and the way he was coming across to the others in the community in which he lived that made them jealous of him. And because of that, it says that Avimelech came to Isaac, verse 16, and said, "Go away from us, for you have become much mightier than we." So what happened is the king himself was embarrassed by the amount of wealth that Yitzchak had, which was greater than his own. I don't know if his house was bigger than the palace that Avimelech had. He said, "You need to leave here." So now think about Jewish history, where the Jewish people have accumulated wealth in whatever countries they have lived in, and what the response of many nations has been to the Jewish people. You're wealthy, and somehow your wealth feels like it's at my expense, even though it wasn't. And so you have to leave. Deportation, Spain, France, Turkey, you name the country. When the Jews flourish, on one hand, we're like, God has blessed us. On the other hand, the nations that we are in hate us for it. It says that there was a jealousy and there was something about it. This isn't casting aspersions on our relatives, but there was something about it for Yitzchak that had to do with him setting up shop in a very permanent way when God had told him it was supposed to be temporary. And so it goes from bad to worse, because Isaac does depart from there and he goes to a different place and he dwells there in verse 17. In verse 17, it uses the same word, Vayeshev Sham, and he dwelled there. So yes, he moved, but he made himself permanent again. And what happens then? He starts digging wells. Verse 19, Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of fresh water. The herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Yitzchak's herdsmen, saying the famous words that also have been hurled at us through history, "The water is ours." So even though it really wasn't, they claimed it. And so he names that name, the name of that well, Esek, because it means they were involved with him there, fighting. So they dug another well. They dug another well and they quarreled over that as well. And so he called it Sitna, from the word to be like an enemy. And so things were not going so well for Yitzchak. On one hand, he has all this prosperity and he's digging these wells, and all of his efforts seem to be thwarted now. So what's happened to this blessing? There seems to be something missing. But now we're going to have the third well, and something different is going to happen. Let's see if we can see what it is. Verse 22, he relocated from there and dug another well. They did not quarrel over it, so he called its name Rehovot, just like the town of Rehovot. And then this time there was no quarrel. And he said, "For now Hashem has granted us ample space and we can be fruitful in the land." So you might have a question. The first well, they said, "No, the water is ours," and so they moved. And he did a second well and they quarreled over that. And now there's the third well, and all of a sudden they're not quarreling over that. It's like, why weren't they quarreling? Why didn't they say the same thing to Yitzchak? They seem to have, did they have a change of heart? Did they get tired of fighting? It's like, I don't think so. People don't never get tired of fighting. For some reason, we run out of energy for a lot of things, but fighting isn't one of them. So it says, like, what happened between well 2 and well 3? Yitzchak does something. And in the English, it doesn't come across, but in the Hebrew, it does. When it says there, verse 22, he relocated from there and dug another well. The word for that relocating is in verse 21. It's actually verse 22. It's mislabeled in the parsha. Vayatek, vayatek, vav ya yud ayin taf kuf. Vayatek, he relocated. That word is only used one other place in the entire Tanakh, and we're going to go and we're going to find where it is. But there's something about this relocation that changes the way the people in the neighborhood feel about this well that he is digging. And then go to page 133, we're going to see what happens. Verse 23, he went up from there to Beersheba. Hashem appeared to him that night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bless you and increase your offspring because of Abraham, my servant. He built an altar there, invoked Hashem by name, and there he pitched his tent. There Isaac's servants dug a well, and nobody objected. And the key word there is, and there he pitched his tent. Okay, instead of making a permanent home, he pitched his tent. Not because he's a tent dweller, but because he had a different perspective about all of the wealth that God had given him, and realize and recognize what his wealth was for. Because we have to ask ourselves that question, why from the very beginning does God make a promise to Abraham to make him wealthy and great? Why should he make him somebody who is famous, well-known, a lot of resources, children? What's that for? What is that for? We have to understand what that's for. Etta, you have a comment?
Well, just that we honor those people who have success.
Okay, we do honor people who have success. And not only do people honor people who have success, how do the people who have success often feel about their success?
They're very great.
They honor themselves. It's like, whoa, look at me. God bless me. Mazel tov to
Yes,
me and
but
mine.
also they donate, they give to charity in honor of their.
God willing, that is what they do. But there's a challenge of wealth. The challenge of wealth is to start thinking you are the source of it. And this was the challenge, is Abraham understood what wealth was and what it was to be used for. Yitzchak had to also, it's one thing when you grow up in a family that's wealthy, okay, so you maybe take things for granted. But the real test is, what do you do with wealth that you appear to generate? How do we act about the resources we have? Do we consider them permanent possessions of ourselves, of me, myself, and I? Or are they tools in order to serve Hashem? What Yitzchak needed to experience was this all comes from God. This is what he comes to. And the word goes from, he changes from being the Yoshev, of being the person who is attached to the land. And when we say attached, we don't mean just like how long have you lived in your house, and if you move every 5 minutes or every 5 years, then you're considered not a permanent. It's a mentality. How do we see ourselves in this world? How do we see our possessions? How do we understand the wealth and whatever blessings God has given us? Do we understand that they are tools to help us fulfill God's task for us, which is bringing people to a life of knowledge of God, of spiritual connection? Do we understand that's what our wealth is, that it's a tool? When it uses the word yeshev, it means like he got attached to his stuff. And so God made it with these fights over the well. It's like, I can stop all of this in a minute. The well, it can be plugged up, I can have fighting over it, and it can just go away like that. So he has this change of heart, or this epiphany, if you will, between the second and the third well. And that is when he relocates. So when we talk about a relocation, it's not just that he changed place, he relocated his mindset. It's like, oh, wait a minute. This blessing isn't just like, I just loved Abraham and I love Yitzchak, and so I'm going to give him a lot of stuff. So many of us feel like we have the things we have, like we deserve them, like I deserve like this nice, good life. Instead of like, wow, this is all such a blessing, I owe it all to God. So it's interesting that Isaac doesn't build does not build the, he does not build the Mizbeach and call upon God on verse 25 until after this relocation. In verse 25, he built an altar there, invoked Hashem by name, and there he pitched his tent. There Isaac's servants dug a well. Now he has things in the correct order. The correct order is invoking Hashem by name, pitching a tent rather than building this house and being attached, and then Isaac's servants can dig a well, and this well will be successful. This is a pattern that's being laid out for us as well. That first we invoke Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, for everything you have given me. I realize I'm just passing through in this world, and all the blessings, the wealth, the resources that I have are meant to be used as a tool. My goal is not to die with the most amount of stuff. That's not my goal. And my goal is not to live in an attached way. So on the other hand, we are not Buddhists. You know, Buddhism is all about letting go. That's kind of like the whole thing, let go. You let go of your earthly connections because earthly connections bring jealousy, they bring pain, they bring misery, they bring all of these things. So let go of it. We don't let go, but there's a difference between not letting go and getting too attached. The right metaphor for us is the tent. It's something like you are in a tent, but it's not quite the same thing as a solid edifice. So if you think about it, we have a whole holiday dedicated to this concept, which is Sukkot. Okay, Sukkot is about reminding ourselves once a year for 7 days. Life, this world is temporary, it is transitory, and all of the material things that we have are very ephemeral, and they are only meant to be used as tools. So when we should have like an inventory, instead of how much stuff do I have, it's what do I have to use in this world? People often will ask me, maybe they've asked you, maybe you've had this whole question. People say, what is my purpose in this world? Like, what's my purpose here? And one answer is, well, take a look around and see what you have. If you looked around and you saw, well, let's see, I have an easel, I have some paintbrushes, I have some paint, and but what am I supposed to do? Be like, I think you should paint something. It doesn't say what you have to paint, but it's that you are a painter. If someone gives us time, if we have health, if we have financial resources, if we have an intellectual ability, if we have a capability, we're very organized. Or I'm sitting here looking at the faces or names, since I know all of you, or some to a greater extent, some to a lesser extent, is we are the resource. We are the resources that Hashem has put into this world to kind of work for God. That's what we're called. We're called an Eved Hashem. We are servants of Hashem to serve and contribute what we have to contribute during our short stay in this world. And how long do we have to do it? Is like, God willing, we have 120 years, but there's no retirement from this. That's a retirement is a Western idea that has to do with a perspective that is marketplace related. In the marketplace, where you work for remuneration and you have to have certain physical abilities in order to be in the marketplace, there's an age to retire. When it comes to being a servant of Hashem, until your last breath, it's until the very, very end. And so our question is, what am I supposed to do now? So it's interesting when people have asked me about, as far as, when we move to Israel, God willing, people say, are you going to retire then? I'm like, no, like from what? What does that even mean? Like, I'll go play golf in Israel. I'm like, what does that even mean? So I'll find new ways, different ways, whatever it might be, that there's no end to this. And we have absorbed, and I think men especially, because we see that a lot of men after they retire kind of actually get sick. Some of them actually don't last long in the world because they don't feel a sense of purpose. So that a person has to understand what their purpose is in this world, and that it is not their role in the marketplace, even though that may be how they made their money and they may have been able to use a lot of their talents and skills. When that time is over, that doesn't mean the end of our time here. So Yitzchak gets this message, and then he is able to live in a way that is much more without controversy. What he does not result in people being upset or jealous of him, because he is using his things as a tool. And in fact, the very next thing that happens, verse 26, this is also kind of typical. It says, Avimelech went to him from Gerar with a group of his friends and Fichol, general of his legion. Isaac said to him, you can just imagine this conversation, why have you come to me? You hate me and drove me away from you. Because remember, Abimelech said, you have to leave. You know, we don't like you. We're jealous of you. You have too much. And it's, the Jews are controlling everything. But now that Yitzchak has gone through this transformation, Avimelech actually comes to him. And they said now they are going to attribute everything to Hashem as well. And they, meaning Avimelech and his cohort, we have indeed seen that Hashem has been with you. So we said, let the oath be between ourselves, now be between us and you, and let us make a covenant with you. If you will do evil to us, just as we have not molested you, and just as we have done with you only good, and sent you away in peace. That's a little bit of revisionism, because they didn't really send him away so much in peace. And then they say to Yitzchak, now you, O blessed of Hashem. And now they are able to, because Yitzchak sees himself in the correct way, the nation is able to see him in the correct way. Nothing's really changed. Yitzchak is still extremely wealthy. The only thing that changed was he went from kind of a little bit self-congratulatory, seeing it as like all of his enterprises. You notice in those words that we went, he said that Hashem blessed him, but he didn't ever say at that when he had all the flocks and everything else, it didn't say, I have so much, and so I'm going to make an altar to Hashem and thank him. It was just like, yeah, like I'm blessed. I'm like doing really well, until God kind of shakes things up for him. And then he sees things from a different perspective. When he sees it from a different perspective, miraculously, so do his neighbors. And then they call him blessed of Hashem. But the facts on the ground, as far as the wealth, nothing really changed. It was only how the perspective changed. So when Yitzchak changed his perspective, then the others changed their perspective of him, which is really interesting. Okay, then they make a feast, and they eat and they drink, and then they part on good terms. And then it says that Yitzchak then goes, and they have another well, and they name it Sheba, verse 33. Therefore, the name of the city is Be'er Sheva, this very day. So it says that's Be'er Sheva. This was with this next well that was dug, and things are now looking fine for Yitzchak. So here is the question. This answers the question that on this seemingly superfluous story, like it's almost like, do we have to have a filler story between the blessing and between the Akedah and then the stealing the blessing? It's like Beersheba. So Sheva means an oath, okay, Shiva. And they because they had made an oath there, and a be'er is a well. Okay, so the well of the oath. Okay, that's what Be'er Sheva means. All right.
Okay.
So now, okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So now we need to go back and ask that very important word where it says that Yitzchak, that he relocated himself. And when he relocated, that's where it, that was the time when things went well. So that word we said before that only occurs 2 times in the entire Tanakh. This place where Yitzchak relocates his mindset and goes from the official dweller and being settled to a person who is a resident, more like a temporary. And then we are going to go back and find it. It says, where was the other place we saw this? It says, we see the same thing in Parshas Lech Lecha with Avraham. in a similar circumstance. It says that on page 56, I'm sorry, page 55, when Avram is leaving with Sarai and Lot, and they're taking all their wealth that they had amassed and the souls they made in Haran. This is page 55, the bottom of verse 5, and now going on to the next page, page 57. They left to go to the land of Canaan until they came to the land of Canaan. Abraham passed into the land as far as the site of Shechem until the plain of Moreh. The Canaanite was then in the land. Hashem appears to Abraham. This is the same thing as he had appeared to Yitzchak. To your offspring, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Hashem, who appeared to him. From there, he relocated to the mountain east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, and he built there an altar to Hashem and invoked Hashem by name. Then Avram journeyed on, journeying steadily toward the south. So we see the same thing of a promise from God, like you're going to get this land. And then what is the proper response? The proper response is to build an altar to Hashem, to thank him, and to have this mindset of verse 8, Vayatek, and he relocated from there, and the only thing that he has that's anything solid is the altar that he builds to Hashem. So that's something that is, you could say, more permanent. The only thing that where he's living is going to be temporary. The temporariness is in his tent. So having a tent mentality rather than a permanent mentality of being where we are says that this is the key to the Jewish people, that we are meant to walk this fine line between attachment, I'll say this differently, between being engaged with what we have and being attached to what we have. So again, going back to a Buddhist model, the Buddhist model would ultimately be to get rid of almost everything that you have and to live very sparingly. That is not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is harder. It's almost easier to be ascetic. You know, you just give up everything, let go of everything. So but that is not what this is. What we're aiming for is to have the blessing, but remember what it's for and who gave it to us. And that honestly is harder. It's just harder when we're sitting in a nice home, we have nice things, we have nice clothes, whatever it might be, we have our talents. It's just easier to say, yeah, this is all mine and I'm attached to it. You know, I'm finding as we're going through our house, getting rid of things to prepare to go someplace that is smaller, I'm attached to my stuff. You know, it's like I'm attached even to things that don't even make so much sense. It's like, oh, I'm attached to this. And everyone that we've talked to who has made Aliyah, or even people who have downsized their homes from a whatever, a sprawling home to a tiny apartment, people say it's very difficult and it's also liberating to be able to let go because we realize what's important. So stuff tends to tie us down and change our perspective of who we are vis-a-vis our things. And we judge ourselves based on our things. I must be important because look at my stuff. Instead of I must be important, what am I doing with my stuff? And that was the switch that Yitzchak made. And then when he does that, then he and you could say in a way that then he totally takes on the inheritance that he has from his father Abraham. We think of the Akedah, you know, this was showing Abraham's great devotion to God, which it was, and that Yitzchak went along with it, so it shows his great devotion to God, which it was. But when it comes down to it, the Akedah was something that was for a moment in time. What's the real measure of how we're leading our spiritual, physical lives in this world? It's the day-to-day. It is the day-to-day encounter that we have with our things, with whatever wealth God has blessed us with, what our abilities are. And we want to be sure that we're in the path of saying, first, invoking Hashem's name, saying, thank you, Hashem, for all of this. I know what you want me to do something with everything you've given me, different things at different times. and I am just in a tent in this world. You've all heard the story, I'm sure, about the Chofetz Chaim, who lived, now he lived a very Spartan life because he had so integrated the idea that we're just here temporarily, that he had, I think the reports are he had like a table, a chair, and a bed. And like that was it in his house. And a visitor came to see him and asked the Chofetz Chaim, like, where's all your stuff? Where's all your furniture? And the Chofetz Chaim asked the visitor, where's all your furniture? And he said, well, I didn't bring it with me. I'm just passing through. And the Chofetz Chaim said, so am I. So whether we have a lot of things or we don't have a lot of things, it's the mentality that we are trying to cultivate. And Yitzchak passed that test. And that was the test really for the ongoing nature of the Jewish people, because God promised to bless the Jewish people. Now, I know that there are many Jewish people who are living in poverty, and that is a challenge we have. However, as an overall group, the Jewish people has been incredibly blessed. And we need the blessing, not because God likes us more, but because God expects more from us and wants us to use all of our resources in order to further his will in this world. So we have a pretty challenging test, and this was the test of Yitzchak. He then passes it, goes through this transformative process, and then he is able to then carry on and be the second patriarch. But first he had to figure out, I did the Akedah thing, but now what do I do with my day-to-day life? And what am I going to do with all of the blessing? And how am I going to see it from everything that God has given me? One of the ways we know that he had set up a permanent house instead of the tent that he should have been in was that when Isaac goes to Gerar, he does the same thing and tells the king that Rebecca is his sister. So if you take a look at that, let's see. Hold on a second. Oh, page 129, chapter 26, verse 6. This was beforehand. So Isaac settled in Gerar. That's when he was going in the wrong direction. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister, for he was afraid to say my wife, lest the men of the place kill me because of Rebecca, for she is fair to look upon. And it came to pass, as his days there lengthened, that Avimelech, king of the Philistines, gazed down through the windows and saw, behold, Isaac was jesting with his wife Rebecca. We don't know exactly what jesting means, but he was somehow, it's kind of funny. We don't think of Isaac after being on the Akedah. We don't really think of them kind of flirting with each other. And I don't know if he was kissing her, hugging her, squeezing her, pinching her cheeks. I'm not sure what he was doing, but he was doing something that indicated to Avimelech, like, this is not, this, you don't act like this with your sister. This is his wife. Avimelech summons Isaac and says, but look, she's your wife. So what's interesting is it says that the king gazed down through the windows and saw. This means that Yitzchak was living close to the king. The king was not in a tent. The king was in some sort of a palatial place, gazing down, because it says through his windows, like from the second or third floor, looking down into the courtyard of Yitzchak and Rebecca. And that's where he sees them behaving in a way that is more indicative of a husband-wife relationship and not of a brother-sister relationship. So Yitzchak not only wasn't in a tent where he was supposed to be, he was a little too close to the king. He was a little bit too involved with the goings on of the city, a little bit too involved with all of his enterprises and what's going on, a little bit too much rubbing elbows with those people. And that was like, that's not what you're here to do. You're here to go around, to reach out, to spread out to people. Because we know Abraham and Sarah, they spent their lives reaching out to people and teaching them about God. It's like, what's Isaac doing? He's busy with his enterprises. It's like, that's not why I gave you the wealth. I gave you wealth so that you would have some leisure time, so you could not like, oh, I have all this leisure time, I think I'll, play pinochle. It's like, no, you're supposed to have your leisure time so that you can go out and have an impact on the world. So that's the other question we have to ask ourselves. How are we using the leisure time that whatever wealth we have gives us, what are we doing with it? And if we are just, scrolling through Facebook, checking our emails, sending texts, whatever, it's like that may not be, I'm just guessing, may not be what God had in mind for our use of our free time. So I know I have struggled with this a lot, but somehow, we've talked about that in the past. Remember the song that we learned when we were little kids? Monday's the day we wash our clothes, wash our clothes, wash our clothes. And then Tuesday's the day we bake our bread, bake our bread, bake our bread. Well, now we can really wash our clothes and bake our bread and go to the store and do everything kind of all in one day. So what are we doing with the rest of the time? And being accountable for that time in a productive way, I feel like that's going to be the question. We talk about the questions that we're asked after 120 years. Were you honest in business? Did you set aside time for Torah study? I think that the question that many of us will be asked who have the gift of free time is, and what did you do in your free time? That's going to be a question we need to answer. This doesn't mean that we have to be running around like chickens with our head cut off, busy, busy, busy. It just means we're accountable. And so we want to make sure that we're using our time in a way that is as God intended. So in this interlude about the wells, and digging well always indicates about effort, of the effort that we put into this world. And literally a well is something we're digging into the ground. But what is our relationship to all of the efforts that we put in? Are we stuck to them? Are we attached to them? Are we defining ourselves by them? Or are we using them as resources to help us on the journey that we are in, and hopefully that other people are going to join us in? On one hand, we don't have control over what other people think. There are people who are jealous of us, and there are people who have been jealous of the Jewish people for centuries, and there's not anything we can do about it. And on the other hand, we do have an obligation to not be conspicuous consumers, to not flaunt our being the chosen people, to not flaunt the wealth that God has blessed us with. So we do walk a narrow line, and that we have to navigate it and negotiate it. What changes the equation is where we put God into the equation. That if I say everything that I have is a gift from God and I'm here to use it to further the purpose in the world, then that changes how my wealth is seen, how it's used, and how others may understand it as well. So God willing, we can do that. Questions or thoughts just about this idea and the role of Yitzchak and what his challenge was, and how we have the same challenge, how we might have the same challenge, what we've learned over the years of our life as we navigate this. Etta, yeah.
I always find it a tremendous challenge not to waste time.
Oh.
It's just such I don't know, there's always something you could do to entertain yourself, quote unquote. And unfortunately, there's more and more of that stuff. And I waste hours and hours, and it's a real struggle to do something worthwhile.
It is a big struggle. And, it's, we have our society has a kind of a paradoxical view. On one hand, it's very productivity oriented. You're supposed to be work, remunerate, all that stuff. We value our role in the market. On the other hand, there's a big thing about I need me time. I need to relax. I need to, this big word, chill. I need to chill. And it's like, what does that really mean? This doesn't mean that a Jewish person isn't supposed to take a break or rest. It just means that just like we do everything else, is like we eat so that our bodies are nourished, so we have energy to continue on. We take a rest because we need to take a break and refresh ourselves. But as you were saying, that's a big difference between that and just wasting time, when we find out that we actually spent more time relaxing and entertaining ourselves than we did doing whatever it was that we had been doing that we were relaxing from. So it's a very big challenge. And it used to be that it was hard to waste time. First of all, life took more time. If you're out plowing the fields, or you're running a store, or you're doing all of these things that are very labor intensive, or just even running a home. If you're running down to the river to get the water, to wash the clothes, to boil, to drink the water, and you have to go out and collect the eggs from the chicken, and you all these things, it's like you didn't have any time to waste because the time was taken. So that's one of the reasons our matriarchs and patriarchs were gifted with wealth, is so that they had time to think, they had time to teach, they had time to develop themselves. And that is really, it's a huge test. It's a huge test. You remember in Fiddler on the Roof that Tevye wants to be wealthy enough so he can sit in the study hall and learn, so I just don't have to work so hard. When was the last time we said that? Like, I just needed some time-saving devices so I can study more Torah, or so that I can perform more acts of chesed, so I can go visit the sick, so I can reach out to people. It's like, I'm not sure that's even our mindset. I should speak for myself. I'm not there yet. I am not there yet. I was like, oh, great, some free time. But I think free time is a misnomer. Time is not free. Kind of like there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as really as free time. That time is meant to be managed. And it doesn't mean being busy every second, but it does mean knowing where our minutes are going. I was very aware of that when I worked in a consulting business, and we had billable hours, and you had to account for your time because it got billed to one of our clients. So I couldn't really have billable time being like, well, at that time it was before cell phones. So I couldn't say, oh, I'm billing my Facebook scrolling to, XYZ companies. Like, that's not going to fly. You cannot do that. Plus it's dishonest, but also it made me very aware. And so it's interesting that we're talking about this because I'm always looking for things like tools for time management, as if the tool will make me into a different person, which it hasn't managed to do yet, but I still have high hopes that if I find the right tool, it's going to help me. But I got this calendar that I've been using, and one aspect of it I like a lot because it has things at the top, like blanks at the top where you can put in the different areas of your life. So I might put like my classes, my household, women's trip to Israel, all these different things. And then you can make a list of your tasks for that particular area, which I really like that, instead of having just kind of an ungapachkid list of everything. It's like, I like being able to see what I need to do. But then this is the problem. So I'm blaming it on the tool, not on me, but it's really my fault, but the tool is not helping. Then there's a daily calendar at the bottom, and the calendar goes by the hour. So it says like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. And it is only an hour. It's an hour, and there's a thin line. And I realized that is a misrepresentation of how time really is in our lives. So I'm still trying to figure this out. I want to get a calendar that is more like husband's, which is a business calendar, like for an office, which has the time divided up either in 15-minute or half-hour segments, because there's a lot of things you can do in a 15-minute block of time. You can make a phone call, you can send a card, you can write a check, you can do you can read something inspiring. There are a lot of little things. And when you just see like one little line and it says from, 2 to 3, and you put one thing in there and you feel like you really did something, it's like, how much of that time between 2 and 3 was that really spent? It was maybe 10 minutes, and the rest of the time was wasted time. So I thought that's the kind of timing that we had when working with billable hours, is it was by the 15 minutes. It was in 15-minute increments, and you had to account for your time. I thought, I think this will help me account for my time. If I can see my time more accurately represented on paper, then I can see, you know what, it's not so compelling that you did so great if you have 15 minutes or 20 minutes where you did something, and then there was 4 hours where you didn't. It's like, that's not so inspiring. So I'm still out there for the perfect search for the whatever, but I need to kind of not wait for the perfect tool in order to improve my life here. But it does tell us how we are supposed to invest ourselves and how we how we make the effort we do. And then God promises us that he's going to, that's what the blessing means. Like when it said about Yitzchak, that his crops were 100 times, and that wasn't just, bragging, 100 times what they should have been, is that God is ready to really magnify the results of our efforts. But the prerequisite is our effort. God can't magnify what's not planted. So it's not like we have to wear ourselves weary to the bones, but we need to make the effort so that God can bless our efforts. So God blesses our efforts. We need to make them, but we also have to have the right perspective that Yitzchak comes to through this whole sequence, this whole series about the well, that is usually completely overlooked in this parsha, because the main story is about the birth of Jacob and Esau, and about the stealing of the birthright, the selling of the birthright. And in between, we have the well story. So we would be well served to understand the story of the well, and how the lesson that Yitzchak learned is really a very powerful lesson, and perhaps more important for us to know. I'm not going to say more important for us to know than either of the other stories. The ones that's more relevant for our own personal lives on a day-to-day basis than Rivka's pregnancy and the buying of the birthright, or of the taking of the blessings and the disguise and the whatever at the end. The thing that is most significant for us is that story of the wells in the center, where Yitzchak then connects to his father Abraham's approach, and Viyatek, that he relocates his mindset, pitches his tent, calls on God, and then is blessed. And that then his life proceeds much more smoothly from outside people. Then his strife moves inside into his family. So it's not like he has a life that's free of challenge, but it's not being inflicted upon him by the outside. So God willing, that's what we'll be able to learn from.
Ellen, thank you. I just want to show you my new puppy, and I have to run to put him out.
He's so cute. What's his name? What's his name?
Pasha.
Pasha. And where?
It's
How did
Persian.
Pasha?
It means leader. And
Well,
the Ottoman Empire had pashas.
Well, there you go. He looks like a real leader.
I
can tell.
We're looking for him. Yeah, he's supposed to. Thank you. Everyone be well. That's
You
the
too.
important
Look forward to
thing.
seeing you next week.
Israel be safe. Thank you.
Amen.
Shalom. Bye.
Amen. Shalom. Okay, ladies, thank you so much for joining me. Again, going back to our Clean Speech Colorado, when we, as a reminder, to feel free to sign up through the Jewish Experience, and you'll get a daily video about clean speech and about speaking words of peace. And I want to also comment here on Yitzchak, because here he was, that Avimelech basically had kicked him out of his community out of jealousy. So never mind what Yitzchak needed to do for his spiritual growth. If you're talking about a bad neighbor, Avimelech was a bad neighbor. And that then when we know that he was a bad neighbor, because when Isaac says to him, when he says, like, why have you come to see me? You hate me and drove me away from you. That's not mincing any words. But what's amazing is that he lets them make peace with him. He could have stood on ceremony and said, I'm not making peace with you. Your people argued over the well. You were willing to abduct and rape my wife, and you just, came so close and didn't do it. You're accusing me of things I never did. And now even in the covenant, in verse 29, he says, and if you do evil with us, ... exclamation mark. Because what do you mean you do evil with us? Yitzchak had never done anything wrong to them. Just as we have not molested you, and just as we have done with you only good and sent you away in peace. No, he didn't. Now you are blessed of Hashem. And he, instead of I'd be like, how can you let him say that? He's being so rude and entirely completely misconstruing the past. But he says he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. They woke early, swore to one another. Then Isaac saw them off, and they departed from him in peace. And I find that so inspiring, that Do you have a claim against a person? Do you have a claim against whatever? Are you justified in your anger? Are you justified in your insult or whatever? Yep. But what's more important? Peace. Peace. And he's willing to let it go and make peace with Abimelech. So I find that that in and of itself is very inspiring, that he was willing to do that instead of just saying, you know, you get out of here. Like, what are you doing here? He does speak sharply to them when they first come, like, what are you doing here? You hate me. But then even when they say these kind of mixed message of like, oh, you know, if you ever do evil to us, like I have never did anything to you. And he lets that go. He does not answer back. And then it's like, okay, you come in peace. If you're coming in peace, then let's see what we can do. And then he's willing to move forward with that. And so I think that that is instructive to us, is that peace is not made necessarily when all the things have been worked out, when all issues have been addressed, called out. You know, I called them out on that. He's like, okay, Mazel Tov, you called them out. Like, and where did that get you? That if there's an opportunity for peace, go with that. Go with that. Now, obviously, there's a big caveat here that it is never to be to our personal harm or detriment. And we have, you know, there are boundaries around everything. But in general cases, if somebody comes peacefully, truly peacefully, even if it's not 100%, there's something there to work with. Yitzchak worked with it. And I find that really admirable and impressive. And when we talk about peace, you know, sometimes you just have to go with what you have and do the best you can. This doesn't mean that Abimelech was going to become Yitzchak's next best great friend, but it just meant that they parted in peace and that it was the end of the hostilities. And that says a lot. So hopefully we can find that in our own lives. It may not be the king of another country, but it might be a next door neighbor. It could be someone who's in our community, in our family, whatever. Is like, is there any place that we can agree? And if somebody's coming to us in any way, shape, or form, can we reach out and make peace? And that it said, you know, he made the feast and they ate and drank. And that's how they ratified agreements then, was to eat and drink over it and to say that, hey, you're in a place where we've agreed on this. So he's willing to go with that. So I thought that was appropriate for Clean Speech Colorado, of words of peace, that sometimes we're really, really pushed. We are really pushed. I would not have answered. I would like to say it was of the caliber of Yitzchak, but I would not have answered Abimelech that way if he would have said, you know, and if you ever do anything bad to us, it's like, what are you even talking about? I never did one bad thing to you. You've only oppressed me. So, but he didn't say that. He was much more refined. So that is our story of Yitzchak. And yes, Etta.
Coming from his culture, though, he did great, good things for Isaac. He didn't kill him.
He didn't kill him.
The general, Pikal, and hundreds probably of soldiers. And to him, to leave him alive with his wife and all of his stuff that he kind of stole from them, according to them, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy. It's like, okay, yeah. So sometimes it's like, you know, you got to know. But, you know, don't we think this too about when we see countries like the United States that needs to make agreements with countries that we're like, are you kidding me? Why do we have agreement with them? They're terrible. It's like, you know what? Everybody cannot be the most ideal. If you wait for everybody to be 100% great, you're not going to have any agreements with anybody. It's like you have to sometimes go with whatever you can get. And I'm much more of a purist, and I like to see things like more 100% on target, but that's not really how the world works. And it's like, okay, like you said, for him, he was doing good. And it's like, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. It doesn't meet the Torah's requirements of what we would aspire to be, but sometimes your surrounding neighbors, that's as good as you're going to get. And so go with it. Yes, very instructive to all of us. All right, ladies, thank you so much. Yes, Eileen.
Are you doing a program tomorrow with the Leah chapter of Hadassah?
Yes.
And how do I get on if I'm going to get on? Is there a link?
There was a link that you should have gotten. Did you RSVP for the event?
I don't know. I don't
Oh.
remember.
Okay, Eileen, do I have your email address? Because I got the reminder today and I'm happy to send it to you.
Oh, thank you. It's enaiman,
Hold on one second. E-N-A-I.
Naiman @AOL.com.
Okay, I will send it to you.
Oh,
And it
thank
has
you.
the
It's
Zoom link on it.
11:15 tomorrow.
Yes, the meeting starts earlier, but my part starts at 11:15.
Oh, okay.
I think
Thank
it
you.
starts like at 10 or 10:30, but I'll be joining at 11:15.
Oh, okay.
Great. I'll look forward to seeing you then too.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, ladies, it's great to see you. Hope the
Thank
rest of
you.
your
That's
day is
great.
good. Enjoy and enjoy the inspiration from Yitzchak and his life, and we'll carry on until next week. I'll look forward to seeing you
So
then.
many good points,
Thank you.
Ellen, just like always.
Oh, thank you, Gail. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Be
All right.
well. Have a good week.
Take care, Dorothy. You also. Dorothy, we're gonna come to, our daughter moved to Florida and she invited us to come for Thanksgiving. So we're gonna come to Florida for Thanksgiving week and weekend and the beginning of Hanukkah.
How nice, except we're going to be in Connecticut and Boston with our children.
Well, good. I'm glad. Okay, so I'll come and hold down the Florida fort while you're gone.
But where in Florida is she?
They live near Boca in Parkland.
Oh, okay. We're in that general area. So, well, enjoy. I mean, the weather had up until today, the last couple of days has been lovely. So, and then next week, I will be in class next week, but then we're going, and Ruthie and Michael are going to, lots of our Denver family are going to Park City
Oh,
for
nice.
Bobby and Susie's granddaughter's bat mitzvah.
Wonderful. That's so great.
So yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Well, when are you coming down?
The week of Thanksgiving. So I'm not sure what that date is, but that week. Yeah.
We're leaving on Monday that week and not coming back till the following Tuesday.
I'll be exactly
Or
crossing.
just crossing each other.
Yeah.
Well, next time.
Next time. Okay.
Well,
next time.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Are
Thank you
they
very much.
happy down here?
Yes, they're doing great. They're very happy. They're working. They're really enjoying. They're getting very much settled in. So.
Well, one of Susan, our middle daughter, who lives in Massachusetts, one of her very good friends just took a job in Parkland as the executive director of a synagogue, and I have a feeling it's a Reformed temple, but I wouldn't swear to it.
Yeah, they've gotten connected to the Chabad in Parkland.
Oh, well, I know it's not
Cypress Point.
Chabad.
Yeah.
But well, good. I'm glad.
Very nice.
Well, I hope they enjoy their lives here.
Yeah, they are enjoying it. It's a big change from the Upper East Side.
That's for sure. Well, there are lots of her compatriots down here. That's for sure.
Yes, they are. That's right. They've